I'm Abby King, the Assistant Director of Public Programs, and I'm so excited to welcome you all to a very special PAFA Pours, our toast to the ASE featuring our MFA students. This is one of my favorite times of year at our institution where our school and museum get to come together and really celebrate this wonderful amount of artwork made by our students, especially during this interesting year we've all had and witnessed. As a fellow alum of the MFA program, I'm also delighted to be here to raise a glass to celebrate everyone. So just cheers to our graduating class and to all of you who are here with us. This is, thank you for sharing the time and getting to share your work. I also have to introduce another PAFA alum who's here with me, who's making tonight's event happen. Thanks, Kate McKinnon, for being here with us and being our image DJ. Thank you, Kate, and everyone else for making this happen. So the students who are speaking to you tonight were nominated by PAFA faculty for their achievements, their work, and their dedication to their studio practice. I'm so, again, excited to welcome, I see so many PAFA members, faculty, students, and everyone in between for this night of celebration. And before we get started, I also want to take this moment before introductions to acknowledge that the land on which PAFA is located, where I'm normally speaking to you from, I'm not this evening, but where we are located are the ancestral lands of the Lenni Lenape people, whose presence and resilience in Pennsylvania continues to this day. We have a wonderful program for all of you. We have 5 amazing MFA students who are going to be sharing their work and speaking to all of you. So they're each going to be presenting pretty briefly about their practice, their ASE wall, and so much else. And then we will have a dedicated time at the end for questions. So feel free to drop things in the chat as we go. Congratulations, questions that come up, connections, those things, and know that we'll have time at the end and we'd love to hear from all of you. You also might notice that we're recording tonight's program. This will be up on PAFA's YouTube channel later this evening. So if you know of any folks who couldn't be here tonight, if your internet connection breaks, know that you can check that out later. I also, before I hand things over to our speakers, I have to mention that this is not the end of ASE season. We've had a really wonderful run, but the work is still on view. So if you, like myself, have not seen it in person because I'm in another state, know that the work is on view until June 6th. So reserve your ticket ahead of time. I'm going to drop that link in the chat. We also had a fantastic preview party where folks can come online and purchase work. Know that there are still, you can still do that. I'm going to share that link in just a second, but make sure to see the work in person if you're in Philly. If not, check out the amazing digital archive of the works. And if you can, support these fantastic artists.
Abby, can I just do as a faculty member, do I need an appointment?
We're asking everybody to register ahead of time, just so we know who to expect. There are comp links. I also can, if anyone ever has questions about those things, I'm going to drop my email in. So Nisa, if you want to email me, I can make sure you get a reservation and a free spot as a faculty member.
I'm coming with some former faculty members too.
Yeah, no,
post-bac group, former post-bac, so.
Awesome. No, please tour them through both buildings. So that's a great question.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And now Kate's going to share the PowerPoint and we're going to get started. I'm going to now turn things over to our first speaker. We have Taylor Ross Larson here with us. So Taylor, I'm going to hand things over to you and we'll get going.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Abby. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm grateful to be here with you all. I really love PAFA, and I'm also really proud to have come to PAFA for my MFA and to help, to continue my connections and visits to PAFA. I love everything about the Academy, and I've had a really wonderful time, and I've met some great fellow students and peers and also faculty. So thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. As Abby said, my name is Taylor Ross Larson. I didn't actually include photos of my installation, but some photos of my work that is on display. So I would second that invitation to come to the show. My work is in the Francis McGuire Gallery, so the very first gallery after you come in and get your temperature checked and get checked in. It's, over on the left near the elevators and the stairs that go up or down. Anyway, so like I said, I'm Taylor. I'm originally from Utah, and I came out here for grad school. It was my first time moving away from my family. Well, I didn't live with them for my undergrad, but I lived like an hour away. And so I would go home for like Sunday dinner. But it was my first time being away this far, across the country, and coming to a big old city that's still, manageable. Like now I feel like I know the city like the back of it's like my backyard. Like it's like my city, I just love this city. And I'm also very influenced. I remember when I first moved here, I watched all of the Rocky movies and I just laid in bed and cried because I was so excited to be here. But anyways, I won't spend time talking about Rocky the rest of the time, but I could if you want me to. But anyway, so we can go on to the next slide. Like I said, I love this city. I love being in a city. I love, like the bustle and like the beehive of a city, and everyone in their own world, everyone moving about and doing their own thing, and just like the daily grind of it. It's very fascinating to me. I live actually right next to the academy in an apartment, and I'm up on like the 22nd floor, and I have wonderful views of, east facing windows that I can see over into Old City, and then the Ben Franklin Bridge, and, into New Jersey. And so I've got some really great views, but also I love like going to bed each night with the sounds of the, or waking up with the sounds of the garbage trucks in the morning down below, or the cars. And obviously, as we all know, that all stopped last March. It became like a desolate place and a desolate city. So during that time, and then during this fall, I spent a lot of time outside with a camera and tried to get references of different scenes and places that meant a lot to me, or just things that I wouldn't normally want to have painted before, like this wall, this parking garage cinder block wall that is in Center City that I would walk by all the time. But it wasn't until the pandemic that I was more like just appreciating the stillness and everyday life that was around me. And so I decided to paint it, and it was a lot of fun. And just a scene of everyday life. And I've also was obsessed with painting people from behind, just us as the viewer looking onto someone living their life and seeing their world for a second. You can go on to the next slide. As I said, I live in an apartment right close to the academy, but my windows face the east. So in the morning, I get the most glorious sunlight. And even pre-COVID, I had a lot of interest in windows and interest in Wilhelm Hammershøi and Edward Hopper and Andrew Wyeth. They're all kind of these random artists, but they all did. They painted windows or interior scenes or sunlight. And so that's what I decided to do my written thesis on was, a more art historical interpretation of windows, the symbols of windows in Western art, and how it, has resurfaced in popularity or in thought today during COVID, because we were all on virtual windows all the time, but also in the privacy of our homes with nothing but the window to like show us the outside world, or show us while also protecting us from things from outside. And so I for this painting, I was very influenced by Edward Hopper and his Sun in an Empty Room, and I titled mine the same. But this is a corner of my studio that I first did drawings of during COVID, when the sun would come through and slowly move across my wall. And then I turned it into a painting. And it was a lot of fun to do. And I just felt I was able to kind of simplify a lot of things. And this was one of those paintings that I just was more interested in, just the simplified forms of my room and the sun in it, and how it made me feel, warm, and like the sun was my only visitor during COVID. Especially I myself got really sick with COVID at the beginning, and the sun was like my friend that came every morning, and like I could rely on, unless it was a rainy day or something, then then it wasn't as such. But yeah, you can go on to the next slide. I actually did this painting this morning on the Schuylkill more recently in preparation for the show, but I love running along and biking along the Schuylkill River Trail late last summer, while still in the craziness of the heat of the pandemic. When I would go out and bike along this trail, it was, my one real just time to breathe and bike all the way up along the trail up by, up and around, now I'm forgetting the Wissahickon, and then back. And I love the view of the city from MLK, the bridge near the museum. And so I had this thought in mind and painted it. And this painting actually was received the Louis S. Fine Purchase Prize for the Philly waterways. And I'm very grateful and appreciative of that. And I'm honored to have that. And then the next few slides follow along the same, my fascination with still painting the figure, but also the figure from behind, or looking upon someone who is also looking, in this idea of looking, which is the idea of the window. And I was influenced during my thesis writing of Caspar David Friedrich, and he has, the famous painting Woman at the Window. And I wanted to do the same thing, but in a 2020, 2021 time period of, because that romantic idea of the window in art is also of the lust for travel and looking out the window, like the woman in Caspar Friedrich's painting, and she's looking out the window and she's seeing like the slowly passing ships sailing by, and this desire to get out in nature and to travel. And yet here we are in our day, and we weren't able to get out and to travel and to do things as much as we wanted to, or for a time we really couldn't. And so it was all kind of came full circle to me of like just this reoccurring theme of but here this traveling during a pandemic, she's seated alone in her aisle, and this was actually after around Christmas time, when I had gone home to see family, and this woman was sitting the opposite row from me, and I did some sketches of her and then asked if I could take her photo, and then I turned it into a painting. And then the last next slide was one that also kind of got me started in more of this idea of the figure at the window that I did last fall when we were returning to campus, of this, this chair I saw in Studio 810 up on the 8th floor, where the MFA studios are. And I saw it in March when we were leaving, not knowing when we'd be back. And I remember thinking about this chair throughout the pandemic, of like it just sitting in the window waiting for students, or kind of this like eerily quiet scene. And then when we returned in August to move our things to our new studios, I went by and sure enough the chair was there, and I was able to sketch it and take some photo references of it, and then I painted it for some critiques in the fall, and then included it in my show. And I believe that's the last one, but I'm very grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much for letting me speak today, and I think that's about my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor, for that. That was a wonderful presentation. And of course, I've told you several times, your works are amazing. So my name is Maureen Odira Maduadichie. I'm from Nigeria. I'm an international student at PAFA. I was an international student at PAFA. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be sharing my works with you as a toast to the ASE. Yes, I will encourage everyone again to, if you have the time, go by, go and look at the works. They're really, my classmates and I, we really put in a lot of work, and even the undergrads, I've seen some of their works, they're really beautiful. So you won't be, it'll be very good use of your time to look at the works. Okay, next slide. I'd like to start by, kind of going over the drivers of my practice. Before I came to PAFA, I wasn't very sure about so many things. I mean, I always loved to draw and paint and experiment with materials, but I wasn't really sure where I wanted all that to go till I came to PAFA. I never wanted anything so bad as this MFA, and I'm glad that it has, that I've gotten it and it's, it's over. And I think that I learned a lot. So I'm very grateful for members of faculty and everyone that I met at PAFA. So drivers of my practice are my faith, my family, my home, Nigeria, my culture, my language, family heritage, things that I learned from home, and my present society in America, and my love for material exploration. So while working on my thesis led me to think about things that made me work, that made me do art. And I started to realize there's this term that I came by called natural synthesis. And I started to realize that that was what was happening in my practice. I was combining my present experiences with my experiences from home. Natural synthesis it came up in the late 1950s. It's an idea that came up in the Zaria school in Nigeria. So some Nigerian students decided that they wanted to start including aspects of their tradition in their art practice. They were learning European styles of painting, and they wanted to start to include, things about their culture in their art. And I realized that that was kind of what my mind was always going back to. I wanted to reconnect to home. So it started to manifest in my practice. And the pandemic even made me, want to work with things that I found at home, because nobody was going anywhere. So I started to experiment with my dryer sheets, fabric softener sheets, and to work even more with materials that I had at home. So in this, some of the themes that I'm looking at or exploring in my practice are masquerades, masquerade costumes, patterns, placing patterns on patterns, kind of complicating things, almost like this whole thing of natural synthesis, how you're combining identities. Basically, you're combining your home identity with your found or your new identity. So that is basically what my practice is about. Next slide, please. So I like to talk about the titles, just to also be in line with my whole drive of wanting to connect with home. So being in a new environment really kind of helped me face this fear of loss, fear of losing things that I learned at home. So I started to use like Igbo words, like bring my culture into my art so that they kind of remain alive in my work and in me somehow. So that's what is happening here, even with the titles. Umanwa Nakwa. I'm trying to use Igbo names so that, you know, even though I'm in a new environment, my culture is following me, basically. So next, please. Yeah, like I said before, I'm exploring materials. I love to experiment with different materials, repurpose materials, show them in a different way that like gets the viewer to move close and pay attention to what is actually happening. Like kind of transform something that you wouldn't think, the viewer wouldn't think is beautiful into something that's beautiful. That's also one of the things I'm trying to explore in my practice. Next, please. Next, please. So I like to talk about this portrait and the next one because they're very dear to me. They're portraits of my grandmothers. They were very strong women, and towards the end of my program at PAFA, I started to think a lot about the kind of person I wanted to be, the kind of woman I want to be in society, and they just came to mind. I started to dream of my grandmother, and you know, it got me to think how they lived their lives for others and for themselves, how they were real strong matriarchs in our family. So yeah, I thought to pay homage to them through these knitted pieces, this one and the next slide. The next slide, yeah. And I also thought about writing some words to them as well, also in my language. So you will notice from the sewn, I sewed on some letters, some words to them. So yeah, that's all I have. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity again. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. I want to start by saying that I think it makes sense that, you know, I would go after her in this presentation, and our works, our installations are actually next to each other at the ASE. And I also feel like, you know, she and I come from different cultural backgrounds, but a lot of the things that I pull from really resonate when I hear her talk about her work, because I am thinking about my family and, you know, what kind of traditions I was brought up in and how I might repurpose those traditions and, you know, make work through my lens while honoring, you know, where I also come from. And speaking of, I am from Philly. I grew up outside of Philadelphia and went to undergrad at Bryn Mawr College. So I'm coming to the PAFA MFA program from a more academic background. But, you know, this felt like something I've always wanted to do for myself, and really excited and proud of everyone. So next slide, please. So this piece, it's titled Waiting for It to Pass or for Something to Happen. A lot of my titles were thought of very last after making the work and after thinking about them for, you know, months. This title is actually a quote from a film that Eileen Neff recommended that I watch by Chantal Ackerman. And the full quote is that she's waiting for it to pass or for something to happen, for me to believe in God or for you to send gloves for the cold. And that really stuck with me because no disrespect, I don't really believe in God, but I was raised Christian, and I went to church every Sunday, and as a tradition and as something that means a lot to my family, I completely respect it. But came to realize that it's not important to me in the same way that it is for them. So relating to this work, I also think about the idea of waiting. And waiting can also be a form of hiding. And both of those things can be either protective, but they can also be a form of like self-sabotage and a form of, denying yourself maybe something that you're afraid of or something that you really want. So this piece also is part of a larger part of my process, is using everyday materials and using things that I find. Originally, something I made before this was made out of these vertical blinds that I had saved, from a set that was broken, and I was carrying them around in trash bags, and I had spray painted them and I wove them together, and just, I didn't know what I was doing other than trying to find out after the fact. So after using them for that initial weaving, I thought, what would happen if I make something out of these and preserve its original form, so it's more recognizable for the object that it was originally. And so this also leads into an idea about alteration, because I think a lot of what I do is take something that's recognizable and I alter it in a way that now it's custom made. And so for me, that is like a sort of rebellion, because I don't want it to be for the person who originally made it. I want it to be for me, or for someone who sees it and likes it. Next slide, please. So this next piece is, I called it How Far is Too Far, because I was thinking about this idea that I write about in my thesis called frogging, which is a part of a knitting. It's like a term used in knitting circles, where when you make a mistake and you have to rip out rows and rows of work in order to correct that mistake. This piece is crochet, but I think the concept still applies, because, in discovering myself, and, especially in this master's program, I think we're all really pushed to question our identity and why we make the work that we do. So these contradictions kept coming up for me. And one of those being that, like, healing and progress are not a linear process. And sometimes you do have to go backwards in order to go forwards. So this piece is supposed to kind of represent that concept. I also found materials in this one, which is this crank that I found. And the shelf at the bottom is, plywood scraps that I just had laying around. So, I have to embrace my own quirks too, because I do save things. And, a lot of people who I'm close to think it's annoying but I eventually things kind of come back into use, or I have to wait and sit on it, and then the idea will make sense later. Next, please. So this is another, blinds piece. What I had the idea in my head to make a set of, window blinds out of a mirror. I tried it with glass and I couldn't cut those. So, or, the knife I was using wasn't working. So I was like, okay, maybe acrylic. So that's how this ended up working. But a lot of it is just trial and error. I have the idea in my head, but end up, having to do this really long roundabout and then reconstruction in order to like make it a reality. So that all being said, I think it goes both ways, where I either want to take something that has a use and make that use, irrelevant, or take something that is seen as useless and give it a useful repurposing. This one also, with the pandemic and with isolation, I was thinking about self-reflection. And this is a literal self-reflection when you stand in front of it, but Taylor uses windows too. And I think it's similar, like where I'm thinking about, we're forced to, confront ourselves a lot, I think, when we're alone. So yeah, I'll stop there for now. Next, please. So this piece, I made a few garments during my MFA at PAFA. The titles, I felt, I did more descriptive titles because I think that these garments speak for themselves more than maybe the others do. But this one is what I was just saying about using materials that are seen as valueless. So for, a number of months, I would take walks and just pick up things I found on the ground. So, focusing on this one was the color yellow. So this is all stuff that would have otherwise been trash. And I made this one around April in 2020. So like the very beginning of the pandemic. And, these pieces might take a long time to come together. So I had it in my mind for a few months, but when it was finally made, it felt really like interesting timing. Because I think as a color, yellow symbolizes alarm and emergency. And the piece or a garment of a vest, I think of utility and a uniform, and also androgyny. I think vests are, something that, people across the gender binary can use and can be a form of like an identity marker. So, another part of that with androgyny is I think about queerness because I am also a queer person. And there's a part of queer aesthetic that it very much plays into the tension between attraction and repulsion. Because, in a nutshell, like queer people have been relegated to like societal trash. So essentially I'm like, well, why don't we take the trash and wear it and, make it into decoration and embellishment. So I think that both the piece itself and the person, like they elevate each other when they come together. And ultimately what I want people to do when they see this is just question the role of the things that we discard and perhaps the people that we discard. Next slide, please. This is another garment that I made. In both of these, I'm also using a traditional method like that I draw from my family background, which is quilting and sewing clothes. My great grandmother used to sew her wardrobe. So, I mean, I'm self-taught, but I think of her when I do these. I was also reflecting on, my childhood and comfort. These were, if anybody knows them, they're these perler beads, and you line them up on a little grid and then you iron them flat. So it's like a kid's craft. And I also made these at the start of the pandemic when, everyone's anxiety was at an all-time high, and I was just trying to find ways to feel calm and grounded. So it was a color experiment in a way too, where I was like, if I use this one shape, how many different parts can I make with 10 colors and have them all be different? And the idea of a jacket, I think like a bomber jacket is what this pattern is. And bomber jackets are also a marker of identity, or like you're in a group, you all wear the same jacket. And kind of trying to also upend the idea of like things that are cute and bright and pretty aren't bad or aren't tough. So I wanted it to be both. Yeah, and so I think that might be my last image. these are all works in the ASE, and the works that I chose, I felt, were a summation of what I think was most successful about things that I made while I was here. And I will also reiterate that everything is worth seeing in person if you have the time. I think the show looks really great. And me and Maureen and Lisa and Cherisse are all on the second floor. So if you get a chance to go, you can see all of those up there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shannon. That was so amazing. I really am enjoying the unfolding of all of our works. I don't think it could have been planned better with the overlaps of our content and experience. So thank you, Abby and Kate and PAFA, for the opportunity to share my work with you. I wanted to talk about my decision to come to PAFA as a painter to start. Prior to accepting my admission into the program, I emailed Clint and asked him what he thought about the defensive painting within the interdisciplinary structure of the MFA program that was being advertised by PAFA. And he gave me a great reference of this book, Chromophobia by David Batchelor. And we had a brief email discussion. I think I remember writing something like, if I make a lasagna using sponge cake and strawberries and icing, can I still call it a lasagna? But anyway, David Batchelor talks about this idea that painting as a medium has continued by being constantly tested by that which stands outside of painting as art, and painting embraces rather than rejects those things that might extinguish it. So when I started my MFA journey, I set an intention to keep an open mind about how painting would manifest within my own art practice during my time at PAFA. So with that, I will move to the first slide. This first work is in the Annenberg Gallery and is not only one of my personal favorites, but also embodies for me about what I was just speaking about in regards to painting. Yes, it's photograph, but made up of photographs that have been digitally glazed to create a final image. And what became a really important part of my MFA practice was this compulsive layering and the composite of my experience. So the reading and the research and the writing became just as important to me as the image making, in no particular order, because I, and I'm sure other artists, create and then interpret later. But for me, at least, it became important to acknowledge all of the things that were part of the story behind the story, whenever that ended up happening. So this piece, Enchantment, I can say is highly influenced by my newly favorite writers and thinkers, such as Jane Bennett and Barbara Maria Stafford. And I'm thinking about the electrification or vibrancy of small things that can be focused on or magnified. And to define enchantment, thinking about intense delight in relation to what might be relatively undelightful. And I give this example: enchantment is that cool breeze that hits your face when you're walking down the street on a hot trash day and it smells like lilacs. And what I'm trying to suggest is that it can be those moments that encourage us to engage, to care, or as Jane Bennett writes, that presumptive generosity, as well as the will to social justice, are sustained by periodic bouts of being enamored with existence, and that it is too hard to love a disenchanted world. Next slide, please. This piece I called False Door, and it's hanging next to Enchantment in the Annenberg, also responds to these ideas. So in explaining the title, a false door was carved or painted on tombs in ancient Egypt and was considered a threshold between the living and the dead, where spirits of the deceased could enter and exit. And the living would leave offerings for the spirits on a slab in front of the door. And in a recent critique, one critic commented on the condensation of pattern among other more ethereal or abstract photos. And I'm completely going to appropriate that phrasing or interpretation as I continue to explore these ideas moving forward. This photograph in particular shows two places that merge into one, a street crossing on the corner of Mount Pleasant and Emlyn Streets in Philadelphia, and these beautiful old tiles at Dara Al Fanoun, an art center in Amman, Jordan, that's built over the ruins of a 6th century Byzantine church that's built over a Roman temple. So I just love this idea of crossing over time, space, people, places, generations, cultures. And this image itself crosses over between this work on paper and another you'll see in a few minutes printed on silk. But I am relishing this condensation of pattern and how we settle into our environment or ourselves, or how we choose to form ourselves at the threshold of our experiences. Next slide, please. I called this piece Micro Memories: Skin, Peonies, Petals, Coffee, Clay, Moss, Rocks, River, Wood, also in the Annenberg Gallery. And I'm gonna read a George Perec quote from a book that was recommended to me by several critics. It's a collection of his works called Species of Spaces and Other Pieces. So he writes, it's like in set theory, I share memories with X that I don't share with Y, and everyone could choose for themselves a unique configuration from out of the complete set of our memories. It's the description of a conjunctive tissue of a kind in which a whole generation might recognize itself. So maybe I should have called this conjunctive tissue, which would have been much shorter, but I love this idea of recognizing or forming ourselves in the selective layering of our experience, and how those experiences or objects or memories are translucent and can glow or dull depending on the quality of light within our circumstances. And then if we recognize that quality and can relate the personal to the political or the social greater injustices, what power that can hold for us. Like when I was writing in my thesis, I described it as R in parentheses evolutionary. So evolutionary potential in considering our own histories as a way to resonate in the present and shape the future. Next slide. So these last two slides are of my installation in the Broad Street studio space, which is downstairs when you first walk into Hamilton Building. And I am going to reiterate, like my peers, that I really hope you can come to PAFA if you can, or if you are able, that you will, because and this, like all works, are better seen in person, but this in particular, it's very different to walk through it than to see it in a still photograph. So the collection of these photographs is titled Hovering in the Threshold, Thinking of All of the Different Ways That People Have to Wait. And it is a collection of a number of photographs I took during my time at PAFA. The hanging pieces are printed on silk, and the pieces on the glass are printed on a polyester mesh. I wrote this statement before creating the work, but I think it describes what I was trying to do in this installation. Wandering, discovering, and recording, researching, collecting, and referencing, exploring the deterioration of architecture and the erosion of soil. I look through windows and gates, noticing the layering of time artifacts and natural wonders. Considering what it means to pass and preserve, I am hovering in the threshold, thinking of all of the different ways that people have to wait. I got the idea for the title this past summer, attending a panel featuring the poet Ladan Osman, who in between reciting some works for us, spoke about all of the different ways people have to wait in relation to her experience as a Somali American Muslim woman. And it was, to me, a powerful way to consider the personal experience of waiting. So waiting for something you're hoping for, waiting for something when you should be moving forward, waiting for justice, waiting to return home or to your homeland, waiting at a border. And it got me thinking about the difference of what these things might mean to each of us, depending on who we are and where we are in the world, and how are we able to navigate in these border spaces. And I have a page on my website, which I can put in the chat afterwards, where I write about each piece individually in relation to the whole. And last slide, please. And finally, just to talk a little bit about the process of installation. As I was hanging this, I was also considering how these individual works were existing in the space. And again, if you can see it, I really hope you can, because there are places where the pieces are able to spin and some that are set in place. And what I really loved about this is a kind of finale to my experience at PAFA, and to bring it back to my first comment on painting, is the layering, the movement, and making choices both rooted in memory, experience, and the present environment, or rather how these time crossings form us as we dismantle and rebuild ourselves and evolve. And really that's my takeaway from my graduate experience as I move forward into a life of art practice, flexibility and choice, engagement and hope. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I really love your installation, and you always talk so beautifully about your works. My name is Cherisse, and just like Maureen and Shannon, Lisa and my works are next to each other in the Annenberg Gallery, and I think they flow really nicely together. So I'm glad to be presenting after you, Lisa. And hello to everyone. I'm really glad to be here, and thank you for being here tonight. Next slide, please. This is an installation photo of my thesis works. It's my dream to present these multiple spaces together and create a visual experience, hopefully for the viewer. And I hope to pursue this kind of practice more in the future. And a little bit about my works. My practice is informed by my experiences as a Filipino American migrating here in California, in Northern California, actually, in my early teens. So having come from like a fragmented cultural and familial identities related to a post-colonial culture and also diaspora and the adoptee experiences, I've always been interested in the shifting concepts of homes, in finding meaning amidst these liminal spaces of my psychic experiences, and how identities are built on past identities. But most especially, I really want to find positivity in that and sort of embrace all the cultural and historical and artistic influences that we come to have in a lifetime. Next slide, please. Here's a close-up view of my installation. For these particular works, it's significant that most are located from around my hometown in the Bay Area. So these are really familiar places that we all visit. As I portal back to other things and other memories, my thesis paper is about the nonlinear remembrances and about collective and ethnic memory. I wrote in my thesis about ethnic memory, how it's not about a nostalgia for a lost or utopian or erased colonial past, nor is it about romanticism, but it's a way to find grounding in the present as you reclaim the past and to find esteem or value in what was displaced or deemed inferior. And next slide, please. So I'll just walk you through the works in the show, and I'll begin with this one. It will be from left to right, but you can enter it however you want. This is Liminal Space 3 archaeological ruins or sites. This image is actually inspired by an archaeological site I visited. This is actually the gateway to the city, this arch, although it's in ruins now. The color purple, it's a very particular or significant purple. It's an unnatural color, so it creates a kind of different space but at the same time, I call it taro or ube purple. It's a native delicacy in my culture. So it's also my favorite ice cream flavor when I was a kid. So I'm kind of portaling back to a cultural or childhood memory in this painting. And at the same time, while I'm in the studio, I'm thinking about how I can make it into a kind of misty or atmospheric space. So what you're seeing right now is different layers of this purple, and this is the warmish layer underneath a cool one, which I hope you get to see in person. And next slide, please. So as I walk you through, you're going to move into the tree groves, and these are called Grove 1 and 2, Memories of Homes Through Trees. So as I was visiting these redwood trees from California, I have recollections of the ancient acacia trees of my island. I grew up in the countryside, and in the countryside, superstitions and paranormal and animism are very palpable, and it's woven with this folk Catholicism and pop culture. So I grew up in a kind of very exciting place of the in-between. And as I remember as a kid, I would utter incantations as I passed by certain areas like this red tree, because they're known to house spirits. So I wrote in my paper that I was kind of socialized like that. So it's really easy for me to imagine places as being magical. And the blue tree, because I grew up in the tropics, I really love the space underwater. And it started as a brown tree, but I wanted to create the space of water because the light, how light is diffused underneath is really interesting to me. And a lot of the native spaces in these works are inspired by these native amulets in my island. I don't think they are so visible to the viewer, but I like the fact that I carry them with me in these works and how they have new meanings for me now. And next slide, please. This one is called The Lookout Abandoned Sites, and this is from a military site that I visit. I'm interested in projecting feelings of melancholia or loss or alienation in all of these recurring architectural or ancient trees or rock formations. For me, all of them carry a sense of erosion by the elements. I also project these feelings through colors most especially. In this particular one, I was looking for a specific kind of red, so it took me a long time to find this kind of maroon. My thesis paper also dealt with the melancholic process inherent in migration and assimilation. I'm interested in how, as a collective, if melancholia is is normalized or depathologized and talked about as a collective experience, then it can lead to personal and community and intergenerational healing and how it can rebuild communities. And next slide, please. And this one is part of the two paintings on the other wall. This one is called Liminal Space 1, Shifting Grounds. And for this one, I'm really trying to visualize these mental spaces, how they can simultaneously be familiar and magical, but also unstable. I really enjoy playing with perspectives. And in this one, I like the shifting of the planes, how the foreground can be flat, but you move into deep space. So kind of creating these two worlds or these two spaces in one is part of the liminal experience for me. I'm also thinking of something visceral or felt in the body in these two paintings and the other wall. So they, the other ones especially have a bodily kind of look in the rocks. And so I wrote that all of these places can be places of alienation, but also how they can be places of transformation and collective and personal healing as well. So that is my last slide, and I want to say thank you for being here tonight, and I hope you get to see the show in person because it's really wonderful. And I think we will open the floor to Q&A, and we welcome all questions and feedback in the chat box as well.
Thank you all so much. That was fantastic. I recommend everybody switch to gallery view so you can see all of our amazing speakers. Thank you, Cherisse, for mentioning we would love to hear from all of you. Feel free to drop questions in the chat or unmute yourself and ask. I would like to just kick us off with, I mean, there's so many questions actually that I was thinking of as you all were speaking, and the through lines between your works, especially their proximity to each other on the floor. But I loved how Lisa put the kind of putting up of your wall as your finale. And so thinking about you're graduating with your MFA, this is your thesis. And I was curious if anyone had any aha moments or magical things that maybe were unexpected in putting together your wall, especially with so much displacement in the last year, you know, getting to physically install or maybe through another person install your work. If you could speak to that experience and maybe things you learned, or also working with your peers. It's lovely to see kind of how your work was speaking with one another. And an easy question to start us off. I have this bad habit, I'm sorry, but I'd love to hear from you if that resonates at all. Yeah, feel free to unmute and go as you wish. Shannon?
Sure. Well, I'll just share off the top of my head that the beginning and the end of my installation look completely different. And, you know, I think ideally we were supposed to do it in a day, and I took 5 because I had I had an idea of what I wanted it to look like and started to set that up, and I absolutely hated it. So I had to completely rethink both which works I was going to display and how they were hanging. And I am very happy with how it ended up, but I think it was just like very much trial and error, which is my MO. So that was an aha moment too, when it all clicked and came together and I was finally happy.
Yeah, I'd like to especially thank Brian because he helped me through through my process of installing. Yeah, before ASE, I had drawn up a plan, put up my works virtually in Photoshop, and like tried to visualize how I wanted my works to appear, but that didn't work out. But it's good to have a plan. It's good to have a plan. I think I was the last person to install in that room. But yeah, the entire process was a learning process for me. I learned a lot about printing on, because I had to print some of my works on linen. I learned, you know, when you're measuring in yards, be very careful because it can be shorter than you thought it would be. So yeah, the entire process was a learning process for me. So yeah.
I had the same experience, even though in the installation part, or the Broad Street space, that was pretty planned, although I intuitively ordered them. But for my wall upstairs, I definitely edited out half of the work that I was planning to put in, and felt good about like being able to think about giving yourself permission to just like have this be your final show, and you don't have to put everybody doesn't have to know every little thing, right? So it felt good to like make choices and be fine with it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I did not think that my works would kind of communicate to each other, because I was doing like landscapes and architectures, and I've always been kind of troubled by that during my first year. But I'm really happy to see them together because I had a revelation of the connections between them, and it was really wonderful. I remember while I was installing, I was simultaneously emailing Eileen and kind of talking to her about my installation. So I'm glad she emailed me back right away and kind of helped me out. So, but it's really a revelation for me because it led me to think about what I want to do in the future with projects of installing spatial experiences for the viewer. So.
Yeah, I agree. I'll just say lastly too, everything that everyone else said, I had the same experience. And it was so nice to see them out of my studio where they were like kind of up against each other on the wall, you know, piled in my studio, and then in their own little world on the wall. And like Cherisse, I had some work that I was like, I really like this painting and I'm going to include it. I don't think it goes with the show, but I'm going to include it. And then everyone that of my critics or friends that have come are like, wow, I love these together. Like they speak to each other or this or this. And I was like, oh, yes, they do. I did that on purpose or something, you know, I'm like, thank you. But yes, that it's fun to see that, you know, it's just nice to see them out of the studio and out of stacked on top of each other and on their own little space and their own little world.
Thank you all for sharing. Yeah, it's so great to hear about the way that you all made choices and decided to edit or how things came together. And that's a huge part of this process, getting to have what we hope is the first of many more shows. And I think I noticed, Nisa, did you unmute on purpose to ask?
I did because I worked with every one of these artists here, every one of you. What a great job. I'm so excited to come on the 2nd and see it in the flesh, which has been one of the hardest experiences of my teaching career, is not to see this work in person, because I've been doing it remotely, doing the critiques remotely. And I think there's something gained with the Zoom critiques. There is a certain kind of intimacy, but then mostly it's lost, you know, when you can't see the surfaces and actually be in the studio and see everything together. I really miss that, just seeing singular images pop up on the screen. But I have to say, everything that I've seen today and your presentations have been phenomenal. I'm so proud of everybody, and I feel so fortunate to have worked with all of you. Wish you the best of luck. And I know you're going to continue and go on to do some more wonderful work and have shows. I also think it's interesting how you talk about what happened during the installation. It's never an easy thing, but you know, you had such a limited time, and usually we're there helping. Faculty comes in and, you know, makes comments. So you were on your own, and, you know, with the help of Brian and I guess Michael or whoever else was helping there. It's, you know, under these circumstances, it's extraordinary what you guys have done. So congratulations once again. And the growth has also been phenomenal, because I've seen you mostly all from day one, from your first year. And it's just, I can't even say how proud I am to see the growth of everybody. Beautiful, beautiful work. So accomplished. So thank you for letting me be part of this. Actually, I feel that way. And Stella thinks so too.
I was going to say, thank you for the cat too. That's a wonderful.
She just butts in no matter what.
Oh, I love it. I've known you for a long time, but I did not know about Stella. So
well, yeah, this is because she's a Zoom thing, you know.
Yeah, oh, that's wonderful.
I loved your presentations too, although I've spoken with all of you throughout the years, but to hear it put so beautifully, so poetically into words. I mean, there was one thing that I always would think when I would have a show, well, this is like an out-of-body experience to see all this work taken from the place that it was made and put into a different place. And I was wondering, I didn't hear anybody make any reference to that or say, did I really paint this? Did I really do this? Did anybody have an experience like that?
Oh, yeah. Lisa, go ahead, Lisa.
Well, I definitely did, because those silks, I had never seen my photos printed that big and on silk before I printed them as such. And then even more so, because of the nature of the material, like I did a test where I peel, it's like an inkjet silk and you peel the paper off the back after it runs through the printer. But it was impossible to sew them like off of the paper and get a straight line. And my dear friend did that for me. So I actually didn't get to see them off of the paper and hanging until they were in the space, because I didn't want them to be wrinkled and I didn't want anything to get messed up with them. So it was kind of like, whoa. I was also seeing it for the first time when I hung it.
There's a real learning curve when you put a show up for the first time. And the spaces also are going to determine the installation. And that's a real big learning possibility right then. When you bring it into that room, it's going to change. It has to change. So you can draw up all the plans you want, but when you get it in there, inevitably things will be different than what you thought. But it looks really wonderful. I heard it was great too. The people that I knew that saw the show said it really was strong.
Thank you, Nisa. And Taylor, were you also seemed like you wanted to share. I didn't.
Oh yeah, no, similar. I just, throughout my time at PAFA, actually, there was a lot of times where obviously a lot of very low times too. I had ups and downs of like, struggling creatively or having artist block or whatever, and but just kind of pushing through. But as I was preparing for the show, I had that moment where while they were still in my studio, I stepped back and I lifted my arms up like Rocky. I'm just kidding, I didn't do that. But I felt that. I just was like, wow, I did this. And I am very excited. And I, am proud. I'm proud to be here. I'm proud to have this. And it was like a very sacred moment for me of stepping back and then just seeing it all laid before me. Because during the process, I was like so focused on just getting one work done, then the other, and then building. I wanted to build all the frames for my pieces. And obviously we don't have to have them framed, but with my focus on like the window, I wanted to frame my pieces so they were like a window type of idea. And so I just didn't have time to stop and think about what I was doing until the very end. And then I had a very like special moment in my studio. Maybe I shed a few tears, I don't know. Tears of joy.
I also quickly, Nisa, want to respond to you in the regard of being a critic at PAFA. I feel like in my time that the critics, every single one person that I met with over the 2 years, they are like the life breath of this program. And I really appreciated the challenge, the questioning, and the like I said, the dismantling and rebuilding of our evolution is just like, it's all about you and the other critics and how influential you become in such like a speedy transition of just 2 short years.
Well, it had to happen like that way, when you come in, and that's, I guess, the process of what happens in 2 years. And there's a lot of different voices that you're going to hear, which must be very difficult and confusing. But I think, we each have our own style and our own way of communicating, and you can take little bits from everybody and, along the way until the end. But, hopefully all the voices leave when you leave the school. That's the goal, right? The goal is for all of us to sort of just take a back seat there, and you're, all the voices will be gone, except the good ones, the positive.
Well, I'm going to remember to shoot from the hip always.
Right. Right. Well, I think your transformation is just remarkable. And I can remember our first meeting in your studio. first semester too. So it's remarkable. It's a remarkable journey. The work looks stunning, really looks beautiful. But I could see, you know, all of your interest where you came in. It's all there. It's just taken a different form.
Thank you, Nisa. And that's a great thing. I kind of want to toss out what you're talking about with voices and the influence of the faculty in your studio. And that's definitely something that was said to me when I was an MFA student. And the voices are still there, but you're right. Like, you get to pick which ones you carry with you, hopefully. But I'd love to hear how that interaction, you know, between, that's such an important part of the MFA program, and, you know, working in your studio and getting influences, but also during the pandemic, that was, as Nisa said, is a different relationship. You're talking to people from their homes, from their studios, not face to face. Can any of you talk about maybe that experience for you, or lessons gleaned from professors? I know that that's also another big swooping question, but I'm so curious to see how, like with Lisa and Nisa, those things that you're carrying with you now that you're leaving PAFA. I know it's one that you have to chew on, so maybe we can think on it too.
Yeah. Well, my point really was that all the voices need to leave, you know. So I don't know, that's when you're really cooking.
I think including our own voice. There's a quote that I've heard tossed around a lot that's like, when you're really painting, all the voices leave the room. And then if you're really, really painting, you also leave.
Right. That's been attributed to like Kooning, Guston, everything.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like gone, but I believe in it. So I don't
Yeah.
know who said it. It's meaningful. So now what for everybody? Is this a time like are you saying now what, or is it you haven't come down yet from the excitement?
Yeah, I think I definitely am saying that. But I remember saying that when I was graduating with my BFA and preparing even to graduate, like to my BFA, before applying for the program, because I actually applied like a little bit late to the MFA program, but I got in, and I was like, and I hesitate to say that because I was like, oh, I was so like excited, but I was like, maybe it was a fluke, but I'm just gonna be quiet. Like maybe they, you know, because I was just so excited to come here. But I remember like the Christmas before I graduated my BFA and feeling like, what am I gonna do after? I have no idea, but I felt like a calming, if I work hard and I keep moving forward, doors will open. If I'm myself and I'm working hard, everything will be okay. And then, you know, I had, you know, was like, well, one day I was like, I want to go to grad school. And then I applied and I got in, and then things just fell into place. And that's kind of how I feel now, is like, you know, and it's kind of how we saw during the pandemic. It's like, we just have to keep moving forward and keep, you know, striving to be our best, but, you know, striving to, you know, live in a healthy way that would enable us to move forward in the right way. And that's what I'm trying to do, and trying to remain hopeful and optimistic, and eager to see what doors do open, and willing to take, you know, to go through those doors, even if they weren't ones I planned when I was a child. You know, if they weren't ones that when I was young, I was like, oh, one day I'll do this, but knowing that some will open and I'll go through them, and it might not, you know, be what I thought, but it will be a good experience. And but I think all of you, and I thank all of you from PAFA, because you've been very helpful. And I think so much of the grad program and graduate school is like networking and becoming friends and becoming colleagues and like a community. And PAFA is such a good community. And so I feel confident that I'm on the right path, I guess, but I'll stop speaking now.
Thank you, Taylor. Do any of our other speakers want to address the what's next question by Nisa, or just kind of parting thoughts? And folks, we are going to wrap up soon. So if you have last questions too, please put them in the chat or raise your hand.
I have one thing, and that's, you know, the anxiety. That's definitely a part of this transition and wondering what's next. And I think it's also, though, a big part of choosing to be an artist for all of us, because there's no guarantee really of how things might work out for us. And I think the answer is different for every single person. And it's a matter of, like, you know, what you're willing to sacrifice, or what things are not worth sacrificing, and figuring it out as we go. And that's really scary, but I think it's part of the thrill. And I also am just wishing everyone luck, and I hope that you know, get to do the things that you wanted to do.
Thank you, Shannon, for those beautiful words. It's so wonderful to see not just your work, but the relationships between all of you and the support system that you have all built. And that's something that you can definitely carry with you. I want to also make sure that you check out the comments and see all the wonderful feedback that you're getting from Clint and from our visitors and our professors. And just wanted to point that out, and thank you for everyone for the encouragement. Before we end and I turn it over to our speakers, I wanted to mention, again, this recording will be uploaded later to PAFA's YouTube channel. As me and all the speakers have said, go see the work if you're in Philadelphia, if you're in the area. I'm so excited as soon as I'm back to go see it. And also support the students, purchase work, become a member, all those wonderful things. But again, thank you all for being here. And I'm going to let our speakers each say goodbye and have the last word tonight. In no order, so whoever wants to jump in. Taylor?
Thank you all so much. Again, I'm humbled and honored to be here and to have this opportunity to meet all of you throughout my time here, but also tonight. So thank you. And thank you, Abby, for all you've done, and Kate. Thank you so much.
I just want to say thank you to, it's nice to see my peers talk about their works one last time. And it's nice to see some of my critics here. And I want to say thank you to Abby and Kate, and hello, Nisa and Michael, and hello, Clint. And I see you guys here, so thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you all for being here, taking this time out of your very busy day to, you know, sit with us and hear us talk about our works. Thank you so much. I really appreciate. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Kate. Thank you to all the members of faculty that are here, Nisa, Michael, Clint. Thank you so much, and have a good evening.
Also, thank you so much to everyone who came today. Thanks, Abby and Kate, for putting this together. It's been a great 2 years. I wish I could be a student forever. But with the like pages and pages of resources and references and books and notes, I'm gonna have a lot to unpack in the coming years. So I'm looking forward to doing so. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I'm honored to be a part of this and to have the opportunity to speak today, and really impressed with everyone and with myself. You know, I'm really proud, and thanks for coming, everyone.
You all should be. So congrats. Goodbye, everybody. Feel free to unmute on the way out and say goodbye. Thank you again.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Great job, everyone.
Everyone, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So many hearts. You all are poets. It was fantastic. Lisa, great
Wait a
job.
minute, Kate. Isn't it Kate's birthday today?
Oh, crap. It is. And she left.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Damn. All right.
she got out when she could.
Right.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
Oh,
Michael.
too late. Hi, Michael.
Bye,
Hi,
everybody.
Nisa.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. Hey, Nisa, I was going to jump in there at one point, but I wanted to give a wide berth.